A powerful judge tore up my music on live television and ordered me to leave, but he had no idea what I was about to do next. My name is Aaliyah. I was 18, standing on a stage in front of 5,000 people, holding a folder of sheet music that had just been torn in half and thrown at my feet. The lights were so bright I couldn't see past the first few rows, just shadows and camera flashes going off like static. And somewhere out there, a room full of strangers waiting to see what I'd do next. The man who tore up my papers was a judge named Sterling. He looked at me the way you look at something that's wasting your time. Then he leaned into the mic, so close the whole room could hear every word land. You don't have training. You don't have a coach. I don't even know why you're up here. Do everyone a favor and step off. 5,000 people heard him say that, and for about 2 seconds, I almost did step off. My legs actually turned, just slightly, toward the wings. But then I thought about everything it took just to get me standing there in the first place, all of it, every single piece. So I turned back around, looked him dead in the eye, and said the only true thing I had left. I'm not here to be told to leave. I'm here to sing. The crowd laughed. Not a polite laugh either. A real one. Loud, rolling, the kind that fills up a room and doesn't leave space for anything else. That laugh lasted exactly as long as it took me to open my mouth. I watched a woman in the front row laughing with her head thrown all the way back, and then just stop. Mid-laugh. Mouth still open, no sound coming out. Like someone hit mute on the whole building. But to understand what happened after that first note, you have to go back a lot further than that stage. You have to go back to a house with a bad roof and a grandmother who never once let me believe I was as small as our bank account said I was. I grew up in a house that leaned a little to the left, in a neighborhood most people only ever saw through a locked car window. My grandmother, Clara, raised me. There was no father around, and no mother most days either. Just Grandma and me, and a kitchen table where she sat every month with an electric bill in one hand and a grocery list in the other, doing math that never quite balanced no matter how many times she ran it. Some winters we wore our coats inside the house because turning the heat up meant something else didn't get paid that month. She used to tell me we weren't struggling, we were just between blessings. I didn't get what that meant when I was little. I get it completely now. There was a week the lights got shut off for 2 straight days, and Grandma sat across from me by candlelight, quietly giving herself a smaller plate than mine. No comment. No complaint. Like it was nothing. I noticed. I never said a word about it, but I noticed. And I've never once forgotten it. That's around when I stopped asking for things at the store. Not because she told me to, because I understood, in whatever way a kid understands these things, exactly what it cost her every single time I did. When I was 4, Grandma brought me to church like she did every Sunday, and sat me down in the front pew. She directed that choir for over 20 years by then. Halfway through the service, I stood up on my own and started singing along with them, and I just didn't stop. The whole congregation went quiet. The pastor turned around mid-sermon just to see where the sound was even coming from. Grandma always said she knew right then that I had something people spend their whole lives chasing and never catch. We didn't have money for lessons or coaches or any of the things other families just handed their kids without thinking twice. What we had was an old record player and a stack of worn vinyl that used to belong to my great-grandmother, and Grandma humming hymns over the ironing board every single Sunday night while she pressed our clothes for church. I taught myself to sing by matching my breath to voices recorded before I was even born. Sitting on the floor of a cramped little room with no air conditioning, running the same 4 bars over and over until my chest ached. Nobody trained my ear. Nobody trained my lungs. I built both of those things myself, alone on a bedroom floor, because that was the only kind of training we could actually afford. There were nights I pushed so hard I lost my voice completely. and Grandma would make me tea with honey and send me straight to bed. Not because she wanted me to quit. She always said a voice needed to be respected, not just used. By the time I hit my early teens, people were driving in from other towns just to hear a teenage girl sing without a single microphone in a room built for maybe 200 people. Tops. The competition that changed everything was called the National Young Voices Championship, and the entry fee alone might as well have been a fortune to us. I never even brought it up to Grandma. I already knew there wasn't money sitting around waiting to be spent on something like that. So imagine my face when she handed me an envelope one morning, the entire fee inside in cash, like it was nothing. I asked her where it came from. She got quiet in a way that made my stomach drop straight through the floor. She kept insisting it was fine, that she had plenty saved up. But Grandma has never once in her life been a good liar. It took 2 more days for the truth to come out. She'd used the money she'd been saving for her arthritis medication. Money she needed just to get through her own mornings without her hands locking up on her. When I found out, I tried to hand it right back, furious. She just grabbed my chin, tilted my head up so I had no choice but to look at her and said, "Baby, it's just pills. I can get more pills. I can't get you another shot at this." I couldn't argue with that, even though every part of me wanted to. I promised myself, right there in that kitchen, that whatever happened on that stage, it had better be worth what she gave up to put me on it. I rode nearly a full day on a crowded overnight bus just to reach the competition, my sheet music sitting in a plastic grocery bag because I didn't own a folder nice enough for it. The sole on my left shoe had split a week earlier, so Grandma glued it back on the morning I left. And I swear I could still smell the glue when I walked into the lobby of that building. And what a lobby it was. Marble floors under my feet. Chandeliers the size of small cars hanging overhead. A check-in table lined with kids whose families had brought personal vocal coaches and enough designer luggage to open a boutique. A staff member stopped me near a side entrance and asked, pretty bluntly, if I was lost. I told her just as calmly that I was a contestant. She looked at my grocery bag, then back at my face, and didn't say another word. Neither did I. I just walked past her and found my line. While I waited, I watched a girl a few spots ahead of me hand her sheet music to an assistant like it was a coat to check, then complain loudly to her mother that the snacks in the green room weren't the right brand. I stood there in my one good dress, holding a grocery bag with my entire future in it. And somehow that thought made me feel steadier, instead of smaller. The morning of the first round, my phone rang. It was my manager from the diner where I worked weekends, telling me flat out that if I wasn't behind that counter for my shift, I shouldn't bother coming back at all. I stood in a backstage hallway, staring at that phone, genuinely 2 seconds from calling Grandma and telling her I'd made a mistake, that I needed to catch the next bus home and hold on to the only paycheck I actually had. That's when a guy named Jordan sat down next to me like we'd known each other for years. He didn't ask why I looked like I was about to cry. He just said, "You can always call the diner back. You can't unmiss this." I told him I might actually lose my job over it. He shrugged. "Then you lose it. Worse things happen than losing a diner job." He didn't treat me like the girl with the grocery bag. He treated me like real competition, which honestly was the nicest thing anyone in that whole building had done for me all day. Turned out Jordan had grown up nothing like me. Lessons since he was 6 years old. A family name that opened doors before he even knocked on them. I asked him later why he was even bothering with a girl he'd met 10 minutes earlier. He just said, "Talent's talent. I'd rather lose to the real thing than beat somebody who never had a shot." I did call the diner back eventually, after everything was over. My manager didn't even let me finish the sentence before he told me the position was filled. And honestly, I couldn't even be mad about it. Turns out I didn't need those shifts anymore. I'll get to that. That's the stage I told you about at the start. The one where Sterling tore my papers in half because they didn't list a single formal school or coach. That's the laughter I told you about, too. What I haven't told you yet is what happened right after. I stepped up to the mic, closed my eyes, and sang the same old hymn my grandmother used to hum over the ironing board on Sunday nights. No tricks, no gimmicks. Just me, and years of practicing alone in a room with no air conditioning. My hands were shaking so bad I laced my fingers together just to keep them still. For the first few seconds, I genuinely couldn't tell if the ringing in my ears was fear or the whole room holding its breath. By the second line, the laughing was gone completely, like it had never happened at all. By the final note, one judge, a longtime veteran named Evelyn, was on her feet. Somebody told me afterward that hadn't happened for a first-round performance in over 20 years. The crowd roared so loud I felt it in my chest more than I actually heard it. And then Sterling picked up his scorecard, looked me dead in the eye, and wrote down a 92. 6 points under a well-connected pop singer who'd gone flat twice that same night and still walked away with a 98. I didn't need anybody to explain that gap to me. The crowd's reaction alone pushed me through to the semifinals anyway, but I understood right then exactly what I was up against. It was never going to be about how well I could sing. By the semifinals, the lineup had somehow changed overnight, and I found myself bumped to the very last slot of the night. The slot every performer dreads, when the judges are tired and the crowd's already thinning out and everybody just wants to go home. I didn't think much of it at the time. Not until I found out Sterling's wife, Victoria, had spent that entire evening backstage in the technical area, somewhere she had no real reason to be. I actually asked a stagehand about the sudden change, half joking. He just shrugged and said scheduling wasn't his department and wouldn't quite meet my eyes when he said it. I didn't push. I had a semifinal to get ready for, and about 20 minutes to get my head right. I was midway through the hardest phrase of the whole performance, the one I'd rehearsed 100 times in that cramped little room back home, when my microphone just went completely dead in my hand. Not a crackle, not static, nothing at all. For one full second, my mind went blank. The kind of blank where you can hear your own heartbeat louder than the room around you. I kept singing anyway, figuring it'd come back on any second. 15 seconds later, the backup mic cut out too. That kind of silence, in a packed hall of 5,000 people, is one of the loudest things you will ever live through in your life. I had about half a second to decide who I was going to be in that moment. I set the dead mic down on the stage floor, took one step back, planted my feet the exact way I used to on that bedroom floor with no air conditioning, and just kept singing. No wires, no speakers, nothing but my own chest and years of throwing my voice at 4 bare walls until it learned how to fill a room all on its own. It hit the back wall of that auditorium. It hit the top balcony. 5,000 people sat there listening to a girl with a glued shoe fill an entire hall with nothing but her own 2 lungs. And for a few seconds, you genuinely couldn't hear anyone breathe. Somebody told me afterward that Evelyn had both hands pressed over her mouth and stayed that way until the very last note, and that a couple of the other judges had to be handed tissues before the segment even cut to commercial. The second I hit that final note, the whole place lost it. On their feet, screaming, half of them filming before they'd even finished clapping. By midnight, a clip of that exact moment had gone further than I could have ever imagined. Tagged everywhere with the same 3 words, no mic, no problem. My phone, the same cracked, half-dead phone that could barely hold a charge, did not stop buzzing for 2 straight days. Old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages like they'd known all along I had it in me. A woman from a music school reached out asking if I'd ever consider a scholarship. Something I had genuinely never let myself imagine as a real possibility before that night. I read that message 3 times just to make sure I wasn't misreading it. then sat down on the edge of my bed and didn't move for a long while. A sound tech named Silas, an honest guy who clearly took his job more seriously than his paycheck required, pulled the internal server logs from that night and found something damning. Both microphones had been shut off manually, on purpose, seconds apart from each other. He walked straight up to the judge's table, dropped the printout down in front of them, and said, "That's not a glitch. Those are timestamps. Somebody did this on purpose." Sterling looked at that printout for a long, quiet second. Then he picked his pen back up and wrote down an 88 anyway. A spiteful little number meant to remind me exactly where he thought I belonged. I read that score backstage and actually laughed, because at a certain point, a number like that stops being an insult and starts being proof of exactly how far somebody is willing to go just to keep you small. When it became obvious that low scores alone weren't going to stop me, Victoria went digging through the competition's own rulebook until she found a clause requiring contestants to have a formal conservatory background. She filed a complaint claiming my training, meaning grandma humming over an ironing board, meaning years alone on a bedroom floor, didn't count as real training at all. Within the hour, my finalist status was suspended. And just like that, I understood that these people were far more comfortable disqualifying a girl on a technicality than admitting, out loud, that they'd been outsung. I called Grandma from a stairwell backstage, my voice cracking for the first time all week, and told her they were saying her 26 years running, that choir didn't count as real training. She went quiet for a second. Then, plain as day, "Then we'll just have to show them the paperwork, baby. Let them try arguing with paper." Here's the part where I found out I wasn't fighting that battle alone. Jordan walked into an emergency board meeting completely uninvited, holding a folder full of paperwork proving Grandma was a state-certified music educator with 40 years behind her, 26 of those spent directing an actual church choir. Silas handed over his time-stamped server logs a second time, this time to the whole board instead of just the judge's table. I wasn't allowed in that room, so I spent the entire hour pacing a hallway with Grandma's hand wrapped tight around mine, both of us flinching every single time a door opened. More than half the remaining finalists put out a joint statement saying that if I got disqualified, every one of them would walk off that stage instead of performing in the final round. And then Evelyn, the same judge who'd given her first standing ovation in over 20 years, stood up in front of that entire board and said, "Reinstate her in the next hour, or I walk. And I'll tell every camera outside exactly why on my way out the door." For a while, it looked like none of it would matter. Somebody on the board floated the idea of just letting the disqualification stand and dealing with the fallout after, since a scandal fades a lot faster than a lawsuit does. That's the version I heard about afterward. The one where I almost stayed disqualified for good, technicality and all, paperwork be damned. I wasn't even in the room when it happened. I still get chills thinking about how fast the whole thing turned after that. Cornered from every direction, with cameras already gathering outside the building, the board reversed the disqualification completely and reinstated me as a finalist. Lev, in front of the exact same audience that had laughed at me on the very first night. Sterling didn't stay to hear the announcement. Victoria left through a side exit without a word to anybody. But reinstatement alone was never going to be the end of this particular story. Not for me, and not with 3 days left before the final round. I walked back onto that stage 3 nights later, and the room felt different before I'd even sung a single note. People I'd never met were on their feet before the music even started, just because of who I was by that point in the whole thing. I chose a piece even harder than the one that started all of this, full of long, exposed notes with nowhere to hide a single mistake. The kind of song that either lands clean or falls apart in front of everybody watching. Sterling sat at that judge's table with his jaw locked the entire time, fully aware that every camera in the building was watching exactly how he scored me now. When I finished, Evelyn didn't just stand. She walked out from behind that table entirely. something I'm told had never once happened before in the history of that competition. Not for a first-round act, not for a favorite, not for anybody. The final scores came in, and even Sterling, boxed in by his own colleagues and a room full of witnesses, could not find a way to keep me off the top spot. I won the entire championship that night, glued shoe and all. When they called my name, I didn't look for Sterling or his wife anywhere in that crowd. I looked straight for Grandma, standing near the side of the stage in the one good dress she owned, crying harder than I had ever once seen her cry in my whole life. People ask me all the time if I think about that first night. The torn paperwork, the laughing, the man who told me I had no future in that building. Honestly, I think about it constantly. Just not the way you'd expect. I don't think about the insult anymore. I think about the exact second the laughing stopped, because that was the moment I understood something nobody could ever take back from me again. Grandma still keeps that torn application taped back together in a kitchen drawer, right next to a full bottle of the medication she can finally afford again. She kept the check-in badge from that very first night, too, taped right beside it. Guest performer, in letters so small you'd almost miss them. Like nobody in that building ever expected a soul to look twice. I don't need a piece of paper to tell me I belong somewhere. I never did. I just needed the chance to open my mouth and one room willing to stay quiet long enough to hear it.
Have you ever faced someone who tried to sabotage your dreams? Tell me your story in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon.